Hi, this is Mrs. Jones, and we're going to do Systems of Equations Substitution Part 2. Part 1 we did in the computer lab, which you can refer back to those notes also. One thing I want to go over with you is the systems of equations is basically when you have two equations and you want to find that one point where the two equations where they meet, where they cross, what point do they have in common. We've worked on graphing, where you graph both of your equations. You can see how we have two equations here. You graph them both and you find that point of intersection. And that point, that x and y, is your answer. And so we've done a couple different examples using the graphing. Well, now we're going to work on solving one algebraically. And so here is an example of one that we're going to solve with substitution. Okay, like I said before, you're going to have two or more equations. Well, in 8th grade, we're just going to have two. So here's an example of two equations. And we want to find what point do these two equations meet. What's an x and a y? I can plug into this equation and get a -6 and plug into this equation and get to -13. Okay, so let's go through the steps and solve this problem. First thing we want to do is in one of these equations, we want to isolate a variable on one side of the equal sign, all by itself. So you have to just look at these equations and see which one would it be the easiest to get the x or the y by itself on one side of the equal sign. And to me, it looks like this one. Because here, all we have to do is move that 5x, and then this y will be all by itself over here. So I'm going to write this problem here. And it's 5x plus y equals a -13. So now I'm going to do inverse operations. I'm going to move my mx over there. It's positive, so I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to subtract. These cancel. I bring the y down. These are unlike terms, so you cannot add or subtract them, you just bring them down. So as our first step, we were going to isolate the variable. All right, let's go to the next step. The next step is part of the substitution. We're going to take what y is equal to, and we're going to substitute it in to this other equation. Since y is equal to this amount here, we're going to substitute that amount in place of y in the other equation. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to take that equation, which is 6x plus 6y equals a -6. And I'm going to substitute what y is equal to. It's like in a basketball game. You take y out and you substitute in someone else. So here we go. I'm going to take y out of the game and substitute in a -5x minus 13. And everything else I just rewrite. Now we want to solve following the steps for solving a multi-step equation. And that would be as follows. Okay, first thing, you want to use the distributive property, which we can do. So we're going to bring down the 6x, and you're going to multiply that and get a -30x. Then you're going to multiply 6 times the -13. A positive times a negative is a negative. And then 6 times 13 gives you 78 equals a negative 6. All right, now it's time to do combining like terms. So let's combine those, and that gives you a minus 24x. Bring everything else down. If you are combining unlike terms, you subtract and they get the sign of the larger. Now we're going to do inverse operations. I'm going to add 78 to both sides. Bring down the negative 24x. Once again, I'm combining unlike signs, so I find their difference. And it gets the sign of the larger number. And my last step then first some multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 24, and I get x is equal to a negative 3. Now I have found my x value. So it's time to substitute in again. Now that we know what x is, let's substitute this value of x into either equation that we started with, and then we'll get what y is. So I'm going to go ahead and use a second equation. So I'm going to use 5x plus y equals a negative 13. And in place of x, I'm going to plug in a negative 3 and just bring everything else down. So 5 times a negative 3 is a negative 15. Bring everything else down. Inverse of a negative 15 is to add 15 to both sides. And I get y is equal to 2. Because when you're combining unlike signs, you subtract them and it gets the sign of the larger number. So now I know that my final answer for this problem is going to be a negative 3, 2. Because your final answer is the ordered pair that works in both problems. Now this is quite a bit of work for one problem. I understand that. But you have to go through each step. Isolate a variable, substitute it in, substitute that answer into the other equation, and you get your final answer.